Hello, my people, and welcome to the latest and greatest episode of...
I want to say mountains again! Mountains!
Last month, my brother and I drove up to Catskill Park where we spent 2 days backpacking around the Burroughs Range Trail loop in the Slide Mountain Wilderness. Throughout this episode, I'll cover the basic details of the hike, and towards the end, I'll highlight a few key points that I think you should be aware of if you plan to hike the loop yourself. But before we get into that, just a little tidbit for those of you who don't know. On this channel, I'm all about sharing my thoughts and experiences on the best spots to check out and the best gear to bring with. So if, like me, you want to spend more time outside appreciating the finer things in life, do yourself a favor and consider subscribing. Also, feel free to check out the description below for links to the written version of this video in addition to all the information and resources we used in preparation for this trip. Alrighty then, without further ado, let us begin. So, as I mentioned earlier, last month, my brother and I drove up to Catskill Park to catch some of that oh-so-glorious northeastern foliage before it disappeared for the year. The plan was to wake up early, drive up there as fast as we could, spend the rest of the day hiking, find a camping spot where we could crash for the night, and then wake up the next morning, finish the loop, and drive home. We started our loop here, at the Woodland Valley Campground. There are a couple different trailheads you can use to access the loop, but based on where we had planned to camp for the night, this one was just the most practical starting point for us. After leaving our car at the Woodland Valley Campground parking area, we started our ascent towards the summit of Wittenberg Mountain. Most of the 15-mile or 24-kilometer loop traverses the Burroughs Range Trail, also known as the Wittenberg Cornell Slide Trail, in the Slide Mountain Wilderness of New York's Catskill Park. The trail summits 3 mountains, including Slide Mountain, the highest peak in the Catskills, where historic conservationist John Burroughs was known to have spent a lot of his time. Following the red trail markers, we began the 4-mile trek towards the peak. For those of you who saw my last few videos about my first time backpacking in the Colorado Rockies, you'll have noticed that aside from the difficulty brought on by the altitude, the actual terrain of the trails is not all that challenging. To emphasize this point, I'll note that I hiked all 30 miles of that loop in plain old trail running sneakers. This hike, however, in the Catskills, was the complete opposite. The trails are very rocky in most areas, and in the spots without rocks, there was mud. I'm sure that the mud situation is less of an issue during the warmer summer months, but in mid-October, all the fallen leaves clog up all the streams, which then flood the trails between the rocks. It's the price you pay for the glorious foliage, people. What are you gonna do? Well, I'll tell you what you're gonna do. If you hike this loop in October like we did, waterproof boots are definitely the move. I was able to get by with the shoes that I brought, but anytime I had to find a way around a mud pit or a puddle, my brother's boots were able to just plow right through. All of the resources we used to research the loop rated the hike's terrain as either hard or difficult. The hike isn't all that long, so this shouldn't deter you from taking any younger or less experienced hikers with you. Most people will be fine as long as they're in decent shape and wearing supportive footwear with good traction. The quote-unquote technical sections have fun little climbing bits that any active youngin' will find exciting, but they will, however, present challenges for your dear old Auntie Agatha's walker and her oxygen tank. Wow. Jeepers, Mr. Cheezel.
I've been 30 cars.
Once we reached the summit of Wittenberg Mountain, we took a short snack break while we took in the view before making the quick traverse over to Cornell Mountain. Hello, my people. Finer Bub here. Thanks for checking out the video. So we just hit the peak of Mount Cornell, and now we're about to find a campsite. Peak of Cornell was not much to see, but Wittenberg had a really nice view. Oh, we might be coming up on a view right now. Ooh. Here, I'll turn you around here. Oh yeah. Alright, I spoke too soon. This is what it looks like from the top of Mount Cornell. Nice, eh?
Hey, yeah.
The 3,500-foot camping limit is very well marked. Once we passed the sign on the way down from Cornell Mountain, we were able to find a campsite pretty quickly. And even though they are not listed on any of the maps we checked, there are a bunch of tent sites with fire pits scattered alongside the trails, starting and ending just below the signs, marking 3,500 feet of elevation on the traverse between Cornell and Slide. Alright, let's find home for the night. Oh yeah, look at that big old fire pit over there. And there's a bench. A bench and a fire pit.
Oh yeah.
Look at that. Now let's just find a nice place to put the tent. Once we found a good one, we set up camp, made dinner, hung our bear bag, and went to bed. The next morning, we encountered our first blunder of the trip. Even though we had started the hike carrying over 2.5 liters of water each, by the time we woke up, we had completely run out. We knew from speaking to a ranger on the phone that there was a spring about 3/4 of a mile past the last tent site on the way up the eastern face of Slide, so after breaking down camp, we groggily clambered up the mountain in search of our next drink. Say cheese, Tevil.
Cheese, Tevil.
Cheese, Tevil.
Cheese.
Ooh. Now we must climb. The Burroughs Range Trail. Up, up, up we go. We are thirsty. Need some water. Hopefully we'll find it soon, soon, soon. Oh, we found it. Yes. Oh baby, look at that view. Oh, glorious water. Thank you. This was my main issue with the route we chose to take. If we had hiked a counterclockwise loop, we could have filled up our bottles right before camping instead of rationing our water during the first day of hiking in order to make sure we had enough to make dinner that night. Glorious spring mountain water. So yummy in my mouth. This is kind of like that Frodo and Sam water bag thing.
Yeah, like the wine sack.
The skin.
When he's like,
Just a few drops left. After we finally found the spring, we made some oatmeal with the fresh mountain water, refilled all of our bottles with my Katahdin squeezy filter bag thing that I used on my Colorado backpacking trip this summer, and then just sat there drinking water while we took in the view. Once we felt decently hydrated, we continued our ascent towards the highest peak in the Catskills. Technical, as they say. If you like scrambled rocks, or scrambling up rocks, or scrambled eggs, you'll like this trail. Despite boasting the highest peak in the area, as I mentioned before, the view from the top of Slide Mountain is not all that spectacular. The peak is surrounded by trees, unlike Wittenberg Mountain, whose rocky summit provides a great unobstructed view of the surrounding area. There are a couple lookout points off the trail, but I'd still rate Wittenberg as having the best view from the top. The next section was probably the smoothest trail terrain we encountered on the entire loop. It's basically just a sandy path until the trail forks and you take a right, following signs for the Slide Mountain parking area. The rest of the descent was pretty rocky, similar to most of what we had experienced during the previous day's hike. There were a lot more water sources on this section of the hike, and despite the cold autumn rain, the beauty of the foliage kindled a flame of warmth within our hearts. We got down to the bottom pretty quickly and began our 2-mile road walk to the Giant Ledge parking area. Once we reached the trailhead, we followed signs for the Woodland Valley Campground along the Phoenicia East Branch Trail, which is marked in yellow. At this point, the weather was starting to get to us, so a little while after we passed the last trail junction, we decided to warm up with some hot lunch. Good. Feeling a bit more lively, we trudged on through the rain, making our final push towards the car. Oh, I think I see the road.
Arrow.
Yeah, baby.
Step, easy does it, no slipping.
There's the car.
There's the tail.
There he is. Oh shit. We're cutting through. We're cutting through.
First.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now that you know some of the basics, I want to highlight some other important details that you should know before hiking the Burroughs Range Trail loop. First, if you start early in the morning, there is nothing stopping you from doing this whole loop in a day, especially if you don't slow yourself down by carrying all the camping gear that we did. We decided to do it in 2 simply because we only had 2 days for both the hike and the 3-hour drive in each direction, and to be honest, it was nice to not have to race to meet mileage goals for a change. I also wanted to use my new Osprey Stratos pack for an overnighter before posting my 6-month review of the pack. For those of you who are interested in that, make sure you click the bell icon and follow me on social media so you know when that comes out. Second, for those of you who do want to camp like we did, I should reiterate that you may only do so below 3,500 feet above sea level. During my research for the trip, I called up the Catskills Visitor Center to get the lowdown on campsites and water sources. The ranger who answered the phone was very helpful, so I've included the number and the resources listed in the description below. According to what she told me about the park's regulations, you are technically allowed to camp anywhere below 3,500 feet, as long as you are more than 150 feet from any roads, trails, or water sources, and you leave no trace of having been there when you leave. When I asked about campfires, the answer was the same. However, they do prefer that you use existing fire pits by the tent sites as opposed to burning fresh holes in the forest floor. Remember, kids, take nothing but photos and leave nothing but footprints. Oh, and before I forget, make sure you bring either a bear-proof canister or a designated bear bag so that you can store your food, garbage, toothpaste, chapstick, and any other smelly items out of reach of any of the forest's critters. Last but not least, looking back on this trip, I definitely suggest that you hike the loop counterclockwise. Out of the 3 peaks that you hit on this loop, even though Slide Mountain is the tallest, the summit of Wittenberg Mountain easily holds the title for best view of the trip. The only other view that came close was from the spring where we filled up on water and ate breakfast on the way up the eastern side of Slide Mountain, from which you can see the peaks of both Wittenberg and Cornell. If you hike a clockwise loop like we did, you'll knock out the best view halfway through your first day. But if you hike counterclockwise, even though you'll have to down climb on the ladders and most of the rock scramble areas, you'll be rewarded by saving the best view for last. Plus, as I mentioned before, if you hike counterclockwise, you won't have to worry about water as much because you'll hit that spring right before all of the tent sites instead of right after, like we did. And that's really all there is to it. So there you have it, folks. I want to wish a very warm welcome to those of you who are new to the channel. If this is the first video of mine that you've seen, I just want to let you know that I also make gear review videos in addition to the travel guides like this one. So if you're curious about some of the gear I used for this trip, make sure you subscribe and click the bell to be notified when I upload my backpack review. However, if you simply cannot wait to see my beautiful face again, I'll leave some links down below that should suit you quite nicely. Alrighty, my people, that concludes this episode of the Finder Bub Show. If you've already been to the Slide Mountain Wilderness, or if you have any questions about our hike or suggestions for where we should go next, I'd love to have you comment below, especially if you think your insight can help me disprove something that I think I already know. But before you do, I just want to once again thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. If you're planning your next trip or looking for new gear, don't let the small details stress you out. Remember, life's an adventure, so relax, breathe in the outdoors, and don't forget to appreciate the finer things in life. See you out there, people. Peace.
In case you need to survive in the wild, get some extra moisture in your veins, you just gotta grow a nice stash like this, and then in the rain you catch it and you go,